Well, Tom, welcome back to Australia and to the
Thank
Countdown
you.
Revolution. A lot has happened since you were down there with Dylan and the troops.
Yeah.
Can we sort of go from since Australia? I know. Let's take the Travelling Wilburys first before we get on to this album. Although this album was started actually before the Travelling Wilburys, I believe.
Yeah, it was. Really, to tell you quickly what happened, since I was in Australia last, we went on to Japan from there with the Bob Dylan thing and all the way across the States, and then I did a tour with the Heartbreakers across the States, and then joined Bob again in Israel and went all the way across Europe.
Mm-hmm.
By that time I was very tired and wanted to lie down for a while. So we took a break, and then that's how I began the album, was when I was supposed to be on vacation, really. I just started doing it in my spare time. So I'd really done 9 tracks when the Wilburys occurred, yeah.
Now, with this album, your collaboration with Jeff Lynne, which seems to sort of, I mean, from a pundit looking back from the ELO days and Jeff Lynne being what Jeff Lynne is, to you two getting together, how did that happen?
Well, I first met Jeff on the Bob Dylan tour in London. He would come with George Harrison, and they would come each night. We were there in London about a week, and they would come and just hang around and have a beer with us, and I liked them a lot, and it was then that they gave me the album they were working on at the time was Cloud 9,
Mm-hmm.
George's album, and I thought it was a fantastic sound and a great thing he'd done there, you know. And then I ran into Jeff again about a month or 2 later at a traffic light here in Los Angeles. So I waved him over, and it turned out we didn't live too far away, that he also lives over here. So he just started coming over the holidays. It was the Christmas holidays. And we just very casually wrote some songs. It wasn't even an album that I'd planned to do.
Mm-hmm.
It just began, and I thought, well, this is, I said, come on, Jeff, let's do one more. And he said, well, I got to go to England, you know, I got to go back. And I'd say, oh, come on, do one more. And we'd do one more, and we'd say, oh, that's good. Well, let's do one more. And it just kept going like that all the way through till it was done.
And the collaboration of the musicians that you were able to sort of put together, I mean, some of the Heartbreakers, some very fine musicians, including your percussionist that ended up playing drums on.
Phil Jones, yeah, he ain't famous, but he's amazing.
He's a great drummer.
Yeah, he's a great drummer, and
so was it just more or less, you know, your friends getting together for this album?
It was really a small band. It was Jeff Lynne and myself, Mike Campbell from the Heartbreakers on guitar, and Phil Jones on the drums. There were a couple of times, I think Roy Orbison sang one day, and George Harrison he would come around to visit, and we got him to play on one, and he helped us with the vocals.
And Howie?
And Howie Epstein from the Heartbreakers came by twice, I think, and then and Ben Tinch I got for about half an hour one day, and he left. So it was just, it was nothing I'd set out to do, say that the band couldn't have done, that I couldn't have done with the Heartbreakers. It was just a matter of circumstance, really. They weren't around. And there was no point in turning around and doing it all over with them. So I took the occasion to call it a solo album and did it that way.
So what happened? Did you put that on hold, and then the Wilburys happened?
Yeah, when the Wilburys started to happen.
Whose idea was that?
George's, I think.
Yeah.
You'd have to blame George. It began slowly. We were all in the same area. I think Jeff was probably the catalyst for George and myself and Roy Orbison being around. Jeff had been after Roy Orbison for ages to do a record. And so when Roy had moved to Malibu, which isn't far away from where we were, so he would come around, and he was real nice, and we wrote a couple of songs, Jeff and Roy and myself. And so during the same sessions for Full Moon Fever, we would just say, okay, well, today we're going to do one for Roy. We had the same band of Phil Jones and Mike and Jeff and me. I said, okay, put Roy up to the mic, and it's a Roy Orbison record today. And we did the same thing with the Randy Newman one day. Did a track for Randy, and Del Shannon, and all, so, you know, all the pals started coming over. We were just in Mike Campbell's garage, you know, just really literally pull the cars out, you know, and we'd run cables and mics out there and had a 24 track in the spare bedroom. So it was very informal recording, but anyway, to tell you about the Wilburys, it all grew out of that to some degree. George was around, and he wanted to add a track to a 12-inch single he was releasing. They were all out at dinner, as the story goes, Roy and Jeff and George, and they said, well, we'll help you do it, and so he phoned me. His guitar was at my house, and he said, I got to come get my guitar. I'm going to do this session tomorrow. Do you want to play? And I said, sure, I'd love to play. So the quickest studio available, I think, was probably the reason they phoned Bob Dylan.
Right.
And we went to Bob's house, and while we were there, Bob got interested in what was going on. And once again, we were out in the garage, you know, trying to, George had I think he had the basis of this tune, Handle with Care. He could play the chords to it, and then we were all out in the grass, and, you know, and Jeff would say, well, how about this? And then, so the words just started to come. We were all sitting there throwing in words, and it was so easy, you couldn't believe it. It was so easy. And so once the track was done, I think at that point, George and Jeff had always, they had this thing about the traveling Wilburys. You know, it was some fictitious band in their mind, and then it kept going. You know, it was a running joke. And so I think at that point, George thought, well, you know, we could just be a group.
Just got to change tape.
Okay.
Right. We're on.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
We're
you want me to pick up?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we were all out there being the Wilburys all of a sudden because that was the logical name. And then we just started in hanging around even more than we were, which was a lot, and doing the Wilburys and writing the songs. It wasn't much time to ever, you know, reflecting on it is hard because it was done so quickly. There wasn't much time to think or make any decisions, or we didn't plan anything. We just started going until it was done.
From the outsider, when you look at just the cover, I mean, the cover's up there, and I see, you know, he's got the little sign, Lucky Devil, everyone.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing spectrum of music, of representative music of players.
Yeah.
Which is rare, I think, you know.
It was a great group.
I mean, I loved when you toured with Dylan. I mean, I thought that worked so beautifully. I mean, the mergence of the two. But to have, like, George and then Jeff Lynne, that you could have said musically were different in England, being two English musicians.
Yeah.
The wonderful voice of Orbison. It was pretty unique.
Yeah.
If not the most unique.
Because if you'd heard it, you know, if somebody had told me about it before I'd heard it, I would have thought, oh, that sounds awfully weird. you know, but when we were together doing it, it was very natural. The key to that group is, and was, friendship, I think, that we did enjoy each other's company and we got along well. If we hadn't, it wouldn't have mattered, you know, what anybody played or sang like. I don't think it could have been a problem. But there weren't ever at all any ego problems or anybody hustling to get up front or anything. Quite the opposite. So I think that was the key to the Wilburys.
You were saying before, like with Orbison, of how you wrote and then said, oh yeah, that'd be a Roy song. The collaboration of you two writing, you got it. When you were writing, were you keeping, because I think you look at it now and you listen to that record and it is a classic Roy Orbison song that suits his voice. Were you, when you're writing that, thinking of, was the voice?
You know, it's a funny thing when you, I didn't really know Roy. They called me and invited me over to, you know, to help them out, Jeff and Roy. And I said, sure, you know, and he was so nice. When I met him, you feel like you've known him for years in an hour. So we were such fans of Roy's, Jeff and me. Anytime he'd sing, it was hard to be objective. You know, it was very hard to say, nah, it ought to go like, because everything that came out of his mouth was amazing. He did it with such little effort, you know. He just said, you know, it just, and he sang that way even when he sang quietly. Like when you're writing a song, you don't usually sing at the top of your lungs. And he'd say, well, how about if it does this? And he'd sing it, and we'd all just go, hey, yeah, that's great, Roy. But he's a real unusual writer. He doesn't write, or he didn't write in the standard way of, say, the verse comes on, and then the chorus comes on, then there's a middle eight, and then you go back to the verse. He would just, there might be, you know, 5 or 6 different little movements to where he followed the melody of his voice. He would sing, and we'd just be scrambling to find the chords that fit under where his melody was taken, you know. And he was brilliant, really, because...
Well, now, going back to your own songwriting, I mean, way back with the Heartbreakers, your songwriting has been not only prolific, but it's been very, at times, to the point that maybe, you know, may shock people, and people say, oh, what's that about, you know? Have you always written, in your early days, did you always write direct like that, with purpose, or was it there just
I think
still came
so.
out?
Yeah, I think so. Lately, I try to write more with characters. I've just discovered that in the last few albums I've done, and I really enjoy writing and inventing little characters, and even the narrators are characters sometimes. The early stuff we did, I think we were pretty angry all the time, you know? We were pretty wound up guys at the time. We can probably still be, but yeah, I wanted them to be very direct, and still do. I like that a lot, you know, just being... I don't know how to describe it, because it's so hard when you write songs. You don't always know anyway when you're writing them exactly what's on your mind until you can finish it and play it back, and then
well, let me put it to you this way. Were you surprised at the reaction that some of the songs would get from, like, you know, when people were reviewing the next album, and they'd hear the songs for the first time, and that you'd hear them trying to interpret different things that may not be your interpretation?
Oh yeah, I'm still amazed by all that. I'm amazed. You know, yeah. Sometimes you have to go get the dictionary just to know what they said, because I honestly don't know some of the words they use to describe them, so I have to get the dictionary out and go, oh, yeah. And sometimes you go, oh, well, that's much better than what I thought it was,
yeah.
You know, or the opposite. But that's just part of it. It's probably, I would think, a monumental task to write about music, because it's really done, you know, for the ear. You can't really write it down and describe it.
Right.
You know, it's like just writing sunset, you know. Well, here's what it looked like. You know, it's just very hard.
Well, now this has been described, I mean, as the solo album.
Yeah.
The first from the Heartbreakers.
Yeah.
Yet the Heartbreakers is definitely very much together, and you're doing a new album with them as well, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
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 Are you satisfied with this album? I mean, I read where you almost passed off saying it was almost by accident, this album. You know, I think this is an excellent album.
Oh, well, no, don't get me wrong. I think it's real good. I'm very proud of it. But by accident, I meant that I wasn't due to make one, or nobody had, you know, talked about it, or if we usually plan them for a little bit. And this one, I was in the middle of it before I even really realized what I was doing completely. That yeah, okay, because for all I knew, there were demos, or, you know, we were just fooling around. A lot of times you write songs and they don't even get to the album, you know, and you're just warming up. But I'd say, well, that sounds pretty good today, you know. Even the next day, you play the tape back, and so I just said, well, I'm just going to follow my nose, and when I get, you know, 10 or 12 done, that'll be the album. It's very enjoyable.
I mean, the singles, I Went Back Down, and it's doing already big business on the charts, not only in America, but certainly down in Australia. When you look back at things that have happened and what you've stood up for, is it you actually sort of, you know, saying, well, I've never backed down?
I don't know if any of us can say he's never backed down. I think it's a good idea to back down sometimes.
Yeah. But you have stood up to a lot of things that have been pressure.
Well, I've always believed, I've just had trouble with the concept of, you can't do that. Sometimes you can. If there's a good reason why you can't, I'll buy it like anybody else. But I've always questioned that theory of I hate it when I feel that, yeah, you can, that can be done. But, the song's very, I think, probably the most like little capsulized version of that part of my songwriting. I won't back down. That's it, And I didn't, once again, when I was writing it, it was almost embarrassing putting it down because it's a little personal in a way, or maybe a little, I thought maybe this is too bold, Maybe it's, I don't know if I want to write songs like that anymore.
Yeah.
But since it's been a record and everything, a lot of people that I run into really identify with it, and it does give them some spiritual strength. So I think it's okay, but I don't take it too seriously.
Right, now just on the touring side, I've seen the group, the Heartbreakers and yourself, in concert so many times, and then that tour with Dylan and yourself and having Stevie Nicks up and everyone. You obviously enjoyed being on stage performing.
Oh yeah.
So is there any chance of you and the Heartbreakers touring again, especially coming down?
There's a chance.
As far as Australia?
There's a chance.
Yeah.
We're going to tour the States first and see how we get along, and if if we're in the mood, we might continue. The trouble with it all is that time. If you put a year into touring, which we're not prone to do anymore after doing it this long, it's hard to get anything done. You can't get a record done. It's just very hard. So you have to say, okay, well, we'll go here this year and we'll go there next year.
Yeah.
But I have every intention of coming back. I really enjoy it there in Australia and New Zealand. So I hope we do get back, yeah.
Well, I certainly hope so too, because not only with the Heartbreakers, that's been one of the mega groups down in Australia, and the Wilburys giving us that, and now this album, and it's doing so much down there already. We think you're great.
Well,
and thanks
great.
for the time for the interview.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.